So now we move on to our next speaker. We have Dr. Pavan Duggal. Dr. Duggal is a veteran Supreme Court advocate, and he carries an international reputation as an expert and authority on cyber law and laws related to e-commerce. World Domain Day recognizes him as one of the top 10 cyber lawyers around the world. Dr. Duggal is chairholder, member, consultant, advisor to several international government and private bodies related to cyber law. He heads his niche law firm, Pavan Duggal Associates. He has spoken at more than 2,000 conferences, seminars, workshops, and he has around 150 books on his name. So may I please welcome Dr. Duggal.
Thank you, ma'am, for your kind words and for giving me this opportunity. Well, Metaverse today brings across new distinctive legal challenges. And as a lawyer, I can clearly let you know that Metaverse law as a subdiscipline of cyber law is going to be evolving very rapidly in the next few years. To a large extent, Metaverse law would be based on the foundations of cyber law. But more significantly, we will quickly start realizing new manifestations and new orientations of the legal jurisprudence coming forward. And today, the fundamental question that comes up for consideration is Metaverse legal? Well, just because the technology is existing, does it mean it's legal? Let me put the question on a converse. Just because there is no law which illegalizes a particular technology, does that mean it becomes legal? So it really depends on which side of the spectrum you're looking at. My thumb rule guiding principle is that if there is no law which illegalizes or criminalizes the use of a technology, then the normal presumption has to be that this particular technology is legal, is valid, and can be used for a variety of purposes. So Metaverse can definitely be seen to be legal. I want to take 2 steps backwards. On the Metaverse, what are you ultimately dealing with? You're dealing with data and information in the electronic form, whether it's your digital avatar, whether it's your Metaverse contract, whether it's your activities on the Metaverse, whether it's a Metaverse crime, or whether it's a breach of cybersecurity on the Metaverse. Depending on whatever you're doing, ultimately, your raw materials continue to be some fundamental common denominators, being data and information in the electronic form. That being so, Metaverse can always be seen to be legal because the electronic format has been granted legality under the Information Technology Act 2000. And since you're dealing with use of computers, computer systems, computer networks, computer resources, communication devices, as also data and information in the electronic form, you are effectively covered by the parameters of the Indian cyber law. But then let's go to a more detailed, nuanced question. What is the Metaverse contract? And is Metaverse contract legal? You can have a Metaverse offer. Some offer can be made on the Metaverse. It can be made either by the digital avatar, or it can be made by the digital user directly on the Metaverse. The offer can be expressed by means of, again, data and information in the electronic form. It could be mere symbol, it could be illustration, it could be a representation, it could be written format, it could be a spoken, printed format, or even could be a recorded format. The moment it reaches you as a Metaverse offer, you have a choice as a Metaverse user to either accept the Metaverse offer or to not accept the offer. The moment either you or your digital avatar accepts the Metaverse offer, it results into a Metaverse acceptance of an offer. And that results into a valid binding Metaverse contract. But then who are the contracting parties to a Metaverse contract? Is it the ultimate users or is it the digital avatars? So I will have a digital avatar on the Metaverse and I can use the same for purposes of entering into a contractual relationship, and it can be seen as a legal agreement. But whether it will be granted the legality under law is a big question, because when one looks at the existing provisions of legal frameworks, one finds that the legal frameworks were never really drafted keeping in mind that people beyond humans could potentially be entering into contracts. So when my digital avatar enters into a contract, it's not me who's entering into a contract, it's my digital avatar. That brings me to yet another fundamental question. Is my digital avatar legal? Can I say that my digital avatar on the metaverse has got a legal personality or a person? And if so, what kind of rights, duties, and obligations need to be made as an integral part of your digital avatar? That's, I think, a big question for which there are no specific answers when we talk today. Where logically speaking, people are saying, well, digital avatars need to be granted legality. But the moment you start granting legality to digital avatar, the question that's going to come up for consideration is, how do you regulate the activities of digital avatars? And whether you require any legal frameworks. So let me give you an analogy. Today in artificial intelligence legal jurisprudence, we're all struggling to answer a fundamental question. Is artificial intelligence a legal entity? And if so, can legal recognition be given to artificial intelligence? To that extent, I find that both artificial intelligence legal jurisprudence and metaverse legal jurisprudence are roughly on similar kind of pedestals. They're at very early stages of evolution of their legal frameworks, because they have not yet made up their mind. And if you make up your mind, then you'll have to make a lot of changes in legal frameworks. Logically, the traditionalists, scholars believe that let the traditional law be applicable. There's really no need for new legal frameworks for the metaverse. But I think as time passes by, and as metaverse as a technology gets more and more centralized in our day-to-day lives, you will have to give legal recognition to the metaverse legal entities. I, as a metaverse user, am on metaverse, fine. I am a legal entity, fine. I can get straddled with legal consequences, fine. But what about dealing with something which is my extension of my digital personality, maybe my digital avatar? Can we effectively go ahead and grant legality? That's our own fundamental questions, because the moment you grant legality to digital avatar, you'll have to start granting legality to a variety of activities that are done by digital avatars. And that, I think, could open up a new Pandora's box of legal issues, legal liabilities. Similarly, can a digital avatar be punished? Can you send a digital avatar to jail? Yes, maybe you can create a metaverse jail on the metaverse. Maybe you can consign some digital avatars onto the metaverse jail. However, would that be effective? What will be the legal mechanisms and parameters? That again fundamentally boils down to the fundamental question as to whether the metaverse digital avatars have to be granted legality or not. So logically speaking, I can't send my digital avatar to jail. I can forcibly retire him or her. I can forcibly discontinue its existence by operation of law. So when a crime gets committed on the metaverse, let's take the recent example what Alokji was talking about, metaverse molestation case. Ultimately, who got molested on the metaverse was the digital avatar. And not only the digital avatar's bodily features were mutilated, but more significantly, a lot of obscene activities were done on the digital avatar. The user can themselves say, look, my digital avatar has been molested or raped, and therefore it tantamounts to my rape, and therefore action needs to be taken. That raises a lot of fundamental questions. First and foremost, is tampering with a digital avatar a crime? Logically so, it should be a cybercrime primarily because your digital avatar is your digital property. It's consisting of digital bits and bytes. You've got intellectual property rights on the same. And if somebody violates the same, then clearly you have the rights for the same. But then, sorry, when you commit cyber crimes on the digital avatars, what do you do? Can you be brought within the ambit of existing legal frameworks? To some extent, yes, but it will get more and more difficult. For example, how will you typically show a metaverse molestation as a cyber crime under the, say, Information Technology Act 2000 or under the Indian Penal Code? Similarly, who do we actually punish for the metaverse crime? We can't punish the digital avatar. We can discontinue mandatorily the digital avatar's usage. We can consign them to a metaverse jail, or alternatively, we can let the penal consequences be visited upon the digital user to whom the digital avatar belongs. Here also, there are a lot of nuances. I can either create my own digital avatar, I can get somebody to create my digital avatar, or I get somebody to manage and oversee the day-to-day activities of my digital avatar. In a scenario like this, effectively, I could be outsourcing the management of my digital avatar and its related activities. That being so, it could open up new Pandora's box of legal issues. Same problems we are facing in the context of artificial intelligence law as well. So when artificial intelligence law, artificial intelligence algorithm goes rogue, whom do you punish? Do you punish the algorithm? Do you punish the person who's written the algorithm? Or do you punish the person who's the owner of the algorithm or is using the algorithm? Fundamental questions, great questions, no concrete answers as we talk right now. But logically, as I go forward, I believe that metaverse law will have to evolve in a direction where the metaverse users will have to be made responsible for the criminal activities that are done on the metaverse, either by themselves directly or by usage of their digital avatars. Similarly, the entire issues pertaining to protection and preservation of intellectual property rights will also have to be appropriately addressed. Because on the metaverse, digital rights or digital properties can be created either by digital users or by their digital avatars. If it's created by a digital user, that's not a problem because that's going to be subject to intellectual property rights protection, whether it's the trademark law, the copyright law, or the patent law of the relevant country. But what happens when my digital avatar creates an original literary, artistic, dramatic, or cinematographic work on the metaverse? In whom does the said intellectual property rights belong to? Can it belong to my digital avatar, or should it belong to me as the owner of my digital avatar and creator and the day-to-day the manager of the activities of my digital avatar? Fundamental questions, still not yet answers clearly written on the horizon. But I believe that as time passes by, we can potentially even take a leaf from how the artificial intelligence legal framework is evolving, where now increasingly there's a new trend where the lawmakers and the intellectual property rights authorities are increasingly now ready and willing to recognize artificial intelligence as creators of original literary and artistic works. So in a similar scenario, I could potentially even not rule out the fact that on the digital metaverse, the metaverse entities, the digital avatars, could themselves potentially be creating original literary artistic works on which there are going to be intellectual property rights, and the said property rights are potentially going to be vested in the said legal entities. So, very fundamental question is how do we effectively regulate metaverse, specifically the breach of cybersecurity? Because there's so much of a sexy approach that's been portrayed for Metaverse. It's actually being tried as the next big version of the internet. But the fact is, Metaverse is going to be unsecure. There are already beginning to start happening a number of breaches of cybersecurity in the Metaverse. And logically so. Breach of cybersecurity is a very thriving economic industry. And therefore, breaching the cybersecurity of Metaverse properties, assets, digital avatars, or activities, or even computer resources on the Metaverse would be a very logical and attractive phenomenon for cyber criminals and cybersecurity breaches. But then how do we go ahead and regulate the breach of cybersecurity on the Metaverse? Do we require legal frameworks? There is no denying the fact that we would require dedicated legal frameworks. Can the existing national cybersecurity laws be made applicable to Metaverse? The answer is a crystal clear yes, because right now it's a strange world that we are living in. Internationally speaking, there is no international cybersecurity law, treaty, arrangement in place. So different countries have already started coming up with their distinctive national laws on cybersecurity. And these laws are being drafted in very broad terms. I think these broad terms that are used in these laws could equally be made applicable in the context of the Metaverse at large. And therefore, if there's a breach of security in the Metaverse, then the provisions of the national cybersecurity laws, as are existing in different countries, could also be made applicable in the context of the Metaverse per se. But then the fundamental question will be again attribution. How do you attribute a particular breach of a cybersecurity on a Metaverse ecosystem activity to a particular Metaverse or real world digital actor? What is the principles by means of which you're going to join the dots? And I'm going to say that it was indeed Mr. A who was responsible for the breach of cyber security of the particular Metaverse legal entity or computer system. That's again a very fundamental question. We are, even in the physical world, in the internet and cyberspace, are still struggling to find out how we can have cogent legal ground frameworks for going ahead and covering attribution-related issues in the physical cyberspace. Therefore, trying to do attribution of Metaverse activities, Metaverse cybercrimes, Metaverse breaches of cybersecurity is going to become a very tall order. Also because, like in the physical world, cyberspace, we are having the problems of jurisdiction, internet jurisdiction. We will begin to start having problems of Metaverse jurisdiction. Because a Metaverse, like the internet, is also a boundaryless medium. Any person sitting anywhere in the world can log on to the Metaverse and thereafter can go ahead and target a computer system, a digital avatar, or a computer resource located in any other country in any part of the world. And therefore, trying to get the relevant offending legal entities who have done illegal activities on the Metaverse to be brought to justice in the relevant legal jurisprudence of the relevant countries itself, it's a big tall order. So I see a lot of challenges. And Metaverse crimes are themselves going to open up a new Pandora's box of potential issues, of issues pertaining to detection, investigation, and prosecution of Metaverse crimes. Again, attribution will be one of the fundamental big problems. Because what happens if I now start logging on to the Metaverse via the darknet and hide my identity behind the cloak of anonymity provided by the darknet and use my karmasthan, my battlefield of action, being the Metaverse, for committing various Metaverse crimes or criminal activities? How can I be made responsible? How can I be even made accountable? How can even I be made identifiable and linkable as having a nexus with the said activities? Those are very fundamental questions which are going to go ahead and stare law enforcement agencies in their faces as we go forward. All said and done, it's a very interesting time of legal jurisprudence to start evolving. In fact, I have written a book called Metaverse Law, wherein I've sought to highlight some of the key parameters of what are the legal foundations on the basis of which I believe that the legal frameworks of Metaverse as a jurisprudence has to effectively evolve. Because if you keep these things in mind, then to a large extent, you can be relatively sure that you at least are on a very, very good, firm territory. Further, I also wanted to talk about this entire issue pertaining to reputation on the Metaverse. So, would you have a reputation on the Metaverse? If so, can your reputation of the Metaverse be tampered, altered, or manipulated? If so, can you potentially have legal remedies? I just like to share a slide if possible when I talk right now. Oops, sorry, I think. I was trying to share with you a slide pertaining to Metaverse.
Yeah, we can see that, sir.
You can see that? Thank you. In fact,
please share that again. I think you have stopped it.
And whether you require any legal frameworks. So let me give you an analogy. 1 minute, please. Artificial intelligence. The fact remains is that legal jurisprudential issues are very, very complex. And those complex issues will have to increasingly be looked at in a proper framework as we go forward. I will try, if possible, to share my screen once again. I had actually are you able to see my screen, please?
Not now.
Sorry, I think. So, I think in this
yes, it's visible, sir.
Thank you. So, this Metaverse law, I think those number of elements will have to be put as an integral component of the Metaverse legal jurisprudence. Because I believe that as time passes by, Metaverse law is going to evolve as a substantial subdiscipline of the broader umbrella of cyber law. So like under cyber law, you will have cyber security law, artificial intelligence law. You'll also have laws pertaining to the Metaverse. So I am more particularly concerned on the interconnection of Internet of Behavior and the Metaverse, because I see a lot of overlap in those particular areas as well. Because I would be spending a lot of time on the Metaverse. And when I'll be spending those time on the Metaverse, clearly, I would be leaving behind footprints. I'll be leaving behind my data. And this data, which can also be accessed using the IoT or the Internet of Things or the Internet of Behavior devices, are potentially again going to be analyzed using big data analytics for targeting my behavior and thereby targeting me. So there are fundamental issues of privacy, more so when I look at the intersection of Metaverse, Web 3.0, and these newly emerging technologies of IoT and IoB per se. And I think ultimately Metaverse will start contributing in a big manner to the data economy as a whole. So the legalities of data economy will also have to be integrally interwoven within the broad elements of Metaverse as we go forward. There's no denying the fact that to the extent possible that the existing cyber laws, legal regimes are in place, we will continue to have these regimes be made applicable. But let's realize that these existing cyber law regimes have never been drafted keeping in mind the current world Metaverse as it's currently evolving. So as we are going to see a more maturing of Metaverse, we could even potentially be seeing elements where we would require to now come up with new legal frameworks so as to deal with the Metaverse as we go forward. I think I'm just going to come back to another point before I come back, which is on edge security and Metaverse. On the Metaverse, I'll be connecting using a lot of AR, VR devices. A lot of my devices will be connected on the edge. And therefore, securing the security of these edge devices will be very crucial for the ultimate protection and preservation of cybersecurity on the Metaverse. So the issues pertaining to edge security and the legalities will have to be intermittently added as elements as we look at entire issue of protection and preservation of cyber security on the metaverse per se is concerned. And of course, intellectual property rights is going to be problematic because I can copy your trademark, I will use your logo, and I see a huge volume of litigation emerging for people who want to protect their intellectual property rights on the turf of the metaverse. Further, I think somewhere down the line, as we go forward, there will be a need for stipulating the rights, duties, and responsibilities of metaverse stakeholders, not just in the context of cybersecurity, but also in the context of the responsibility towards metaverse as a paradigm per se. Because metaverse will be a cumulative combination of all activities done by all stakeholders as we go forward. International absence of cybersecurity law is going to continue to keep on haunting us. And as I look forward in the next few years, we could be having something in this regard. Already the UN ad hoc committee has begun its deliberations on a new international convention on regulating the misuse of information and communication technologies for criminal purposes. But it's still some time away. So therefore, these small chunks of legal frameworks in different countries, whether it's China, Vietnam, Singapore, Thailand, Australia, these national cybersecurity laws will continue to be the foundational cybersecurity legal frameworks that will be made applicable in the context of metaverse per se. I expect huge volume of ransomware attacks on the metaverse. And therefore, we will also need to come up with appropriate legal frameworks for affected parties who are potentially going to become victims of metaverse ransomware attacks. And what kind of potential legal remedies need to be made applicable to them will be yet another fundamental issue that will have to come across. Somewhere down the line, I think there'll be a need for providing remedies for breaches of cybersecurity. There'll be need for making changes in existing cybersecurity laws to make them specifically applicable in the context of the metaverse. And ultimately, your foundation of the metaverse growth will be your metaverse consumer. So you will have to ultimately have legal frameworks to protect the metaverse consumer at large. For this particular consumer is potentially going to be targeted by consumer fraud on the metaverse, by all kinds of monopolistic and restrictive trade practices. And therefore, the law will have to jump in and start protecting the metaverse consumer. Because if you do that, then to a large extent, you'll be doing service to metaverse as a paradigm. Otherwise, you're potentially going to be having problems. And finally, I think the entire issue of legality of contracts must be quickly given legal frameworks and legal recognition. Just as smart contracts are now increasingly being given legal recognition in the US and a number of other countries. And that's becoming the foundation of the crypto ecosystem of crypto economies. I think similarly, the metaverse contracts will be and their recognition of legality will be the turning point for the further big adoption of metaverse as a paradigm as we go forward. Also, what happens on the metaverse? Who owns what? We'll have to look at these ticklish issues pertaining to ownership. Today, a lot of people are buying a lot of virtual land on the metaverse, on these Decentralands and other platforms. Can I say that your virtual land is a movable property? Can I say it's an immovable property? Are digital currencies on the metaverse fiat currencies? Can they be granted legality? And if so, under what conditions and under what circumstances? Those are again some fundamental questions. Right now, it's the Antarctic age. Everybody is in a gold rush mode. Everybody wants to come and capture as much portion of a chunk of the metaverse as possible. Little do we realize that the rules pertaining to ownership of metaverse properties, metaverse assets, metaverse avatars, and metaverse resources will have to be appropriately addressed as we go forward. If you really want some more cogent method to the madness of metaverse as we go forward. And finally, I think data protection will also have to play a very, very important role on the metaverse. Primarily because ultimately on the metaverse, it's your data, whether it's your digital avatar, whether it's your digital metaverse contracts, whether it's your metaverse activities. You would want the same to be protected and preserved. But how will that happen? Will the existing national data protection laws be made applicable? To a large extent, yes. Take the case of the General Data Protection Regulation of the European Union. We find that those could be made applicable to the extent that they are applicable to the metaverse. But very quickly, the specific nuances pertaining to data protection also will have to be appropriately addressed in the holistic concept of the legalities pertaining to metaverse. And privacy will be very, very crucial. I will be very, very concerned that my privacy is not invaded or infringed in any manner on the metaverse. But how do I protect and preserve the same? What kind of legal frameworks will I have in this direction? Can existing national privacy laws be made applicable to metaverse? To a large extent, yes. But the problem is that most of the existing national metaverse, national privacy laws are not directly applicable to metaverse. So we are going to have some distinctive challenges as we go forward in this regard. I think I've already exhausted my time. I'd like to just pause here and finally conclude by saying it's a huge area. A lot of things are happening. And I think all of us will have to be prepared to specifically deal with the legalities pertaining to metaverse, metaverse contracts, metaverse activities, metaverse crimes, metaverse breach of cybersecurity, metaverse privacy, metaverse data protection, and metaverse consumer protection as fundamental issues if we really want to go forward and make a big business case success of metaverse as a paradigm. It's a very interesting time, but the next few years will contribute extensively to the growth of metaverse legal jurisprudence. We recently, a couple of weeks back, had organized the International Conference on Metaverse and Law, Opportunities and Challenges. And I can tell you that I was learning in the entire conference from the various international and national stakeholders and speakers that were coming in. We've already created something known as the Metaverse Law Nucleus, where we are researching on the legal and the policy principles and the nuances pertaining to the metaverse. It's an exciting time, and it'll be interesting to see how metaverse law, specifically in the context of metaverse crimes, evolves in the coming times. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Over to you, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you, Dr. Duggal. It was a very interesting, session from your end. Thank you for giving us input about the metaverse legal aspects and implication available and potential frameworks, and whether existing cybersecurity laws are applicable, how metaverse crimes can be a challenge. At this stage, I would like to convey a special note of thanks to Suraj Nangia from Nangia Anderson. Nangia Anderson has helped FCRF in this webinar. Thank you so much for that.